Welcome to Worth It, Work It, a career-minded show for the anxious and ambitious. Today, our discussion will be focused on political journalism and the women behind the words. It's a job that involves a detailed understanding of how government works, as well as a command of the English language. Joining me today are three hard-working women who cover Capitol Hill, economics, and everything in between, and I'm oh so grateful that they could be here today. First up, I would like to introduce Song Min. Song Min is a congressional reporter for Politico, where she specializes in the Senate and immigration policy. Song Min graduated from the University of Iowa with a dual degree in journalism and political science, earned her master's degree in journalism from American University, and she currently serves as the president of the DC chapter of the Asian American Journalists Association. Megan is an editorial trainee for Reuters, reporting on domestic politics and the U.S. economy. As an undergrad at UNC Chapel Hill, Megan worked for the Charlotte Observer and the News and Observer. She has also earned fellowships to study journalism in Israel and Japan. She's an Orioles fan in Nationals territory, and I think we have a lot to learn from this recent graduate. Finally, I would like to welcome Anjali to the panel. Anjali is joining us from the Washington Times, where she covers Capitol Hill. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of California, Santa Barbara, where she studied a unique combination of English and anthropology, and went on to earn her master's degree in journalism from the University of Maryland. Welcome, Anjali. So, ladies, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Yeah. I just wanted to jump right in and kind of get to know what the day-to-day is like for your job and what it feels like to cover U.S. politics on a day-to-day basis. And I wanted to start with you, Anjali, and just kind of go over like maybe morning to 5 p.m. what your job looks like.
Sure. Well, I have a specific beat. I cover Veterans Affairs.
Okay.
So that gives me something to really look at every day to say, oh, is there anything related to Veterans Affairs happening today that I should be keeping an eye out for? It gives some structure, because I think if you just say, I'm going to cover Capitol Hill, there's really too much to do there, and there's nowhere to start. So I usually keep an eye out for stories, go to hearings, go to events that veteran service organizations or VSOs host from time to time. I'm constantly talking to veterans, veteran groups, the people who work for those, the Veterans Affairs committees in the House and the Senate to see what's new, what legislation is new, what's going on with that. And then, of course, stories come up all the time. For example, John Boehner's resignation, and then the leadership stuff that's been going on. So, you know, sometimes my editor will be like, okay, I need you to go cover that. I need you to go cover the Paul Ryan stuff. I need you to go cover what's going on with the Freedom Caucus. And I just get sent places. But a lot of the times in the morning, I just am like, okay, what hearings are going on? But a lot of it gets planned ahead of time too, because we know if a hearing is coming up in the next week or so. So that's something that I already put up on my schedule and stuff like that. So yeah, 9 to 5. Sometimes you're writing a story and it takes all day. Sometimes you are writing a bunch of fast files that get pulled out and updated throughout the day as we find out something new about the Freedom Caucus's multiple meetings of that day or something like that. Yeah, so every day looks a little different. Sometimes I'm helping someone else with the story. Sometimes I'm writing 4 stories of my own. Sometimes I produce nothing because I'm working on a longer term story. So it's kind of hard to say what day-to-day looks like for me.
And then, so Song Min, you cover a different beat. So is your day a little bit different? How does it compare?
It's pretty similar on the basics. I mean, I cover the Senate more broadly. So I look at what does the Senate have on tap today? Are they voting on anything controversial? What is Ted Cruz up to? What's the drama with the Democrats? So it's kind of like looking at what's going on today, what hasn't been written about in a while, what are people talking about that's something interesting to explore. And right now, the action in the Senate's been pretty quiet since all the fun and the action's been over in the House side with the leadership elections. But we see how, you know, this thing is going on in the House. So how does it affect the Senate? So, you know, I'm up early. I'm checking the clips and seeing what other congressional reporters have written, what's going on. I have constant communications with my editors starting at, you know, 7 a.m.-ish in the morning. Going to, you know, having coffees and meetings with sources, you know, hanging out. The one of the biggest parts of congressional reporting is basically basically just hanging out in the hallways in the Senate, grabbing senators, whenever you get a chance to talk to, a John Cornyn or a Chuck Schumer, and just grabbing them in the hallways to, grab string for your stories and just ask them, what's going on? What's the latest on this issue, or what's the latest in the Senate today? If it's big news or something that we have to, put on the website right away, we're posting short stories to our website all the time. And then we're also working on broader daily stories and broader kind of weekend stories, and communication with our editors for that. But, especially when it gets busier, we're going to expect the next couple of weeks to get pretty busy with some of the budget deadlines that are coming up. So our days will probably go from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
So kind of, you touched on something, the kind of building up the bravado just to go up to someone to ask them a question for a story that you're writing. How do you think you kind of built that skill?
It took time because I actually grew up as a pretty shy person, and I still kind of am. I'm still a little bit introverted kind of in my personal day-to-day life. So it really took an effort, and especially because kind of you just run into a lot of trial and error. Sometimes a senator chastises you for being very rude. Sometimes a senator is really eager to talk to you because no one else talks to them. So it just takes time, and you just kind of saying like, look, I have a legitimate question. I'm a member of the press. This is what I'm about to ask you is something that the public should need to know. So once you kind of put your thinking in that frame, the confidence starts to build in kind of just accosting these senators in the hallways, outside the chamber, and whatnot.
And Megan, how does your day compare to these two ladies?
Mine's a little bit different. So I cover other things in addition to politics, and it's just one of the things I lend a hand to. And so being so new to Reuters, really often it's when I come in, it's just whatever's on the table. They say, Megan, can you run to the Hill for this hearing? Can you help out with this hearing? Can you just go outside to Capitol Hill and talk to whoever's out there? Can you run to the White House? So a lot of that is really new, and just trying to lend a hand wherever I can. But then there are certain topics that I've been covering, and I'm the primary point person for them. So the biggest one, just an ongoing story that's been since I've been with Reuters, is Planned Parenthood. So that's the kind of thing that I come in every morning and I'm like, is there something new? Because so often there is, because it's just been such a, there's just new developments every third day or so with another presidential candidate said something, or there's another lawsuit in another state. So there's a couple topics like that I really stay on top of and check in on. And then in the quieter periods, there's just so many things going on that I can it's doing research, and it's trying to figure out a little bit of what you said as well, is what hasn't been written about recently, what's being talked about that isn't yet in the media, and doing more research like that. So it's every day is different, and just checking in on longer term stories and then seeing what other ones I should start.
So being in journalism, I feel it's really built on relationships, not only inside of the newsroom, but outside of the newsroom. So I was just wondering if you guys could chat a little about what the most important relationship is to a reporter, whether it's one in the newsroom or outside of. I just feel like it's one of the more people-centric jobs as you approach it. So I would just love, I guess we can start with Salman and just kind of, who's the most important person to you?
Well, I mean, this is cheesy, but your relationship with the reader is the most important at the end of the day. And it depends on readership. I mean, Reuters has a different readership than Politico, which has a different readership than the Washington Times. We try to cater to a very specific audience. Our audience is everyone who is, we kind of try to be like the ESPN, if you will, for politics. So really the junkies out there, for the people who have to know every little happenings on the Hill, or every little, the latest developments on the campaign. So we think about our readership in that way. We're like, what do our readers look for in terms of stories and things they want to learn? So I think that's the relationship ultimately at the end of the day that's really important to cultivate, because that informs what kind of stories you do, what stories are important to you, what you prioritize over another assignment, and whatnot. And you have to get along with your editor too. So.
Anjali, do you want to speak on maybe like inside of the newsroom? Who is the most important person to you?
Sure, 100% my editor.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, inside the newsroom, my editor is the person I have to touch base with on everything. He's the one who reads my stories and tells me when I am missing something major, which happens from time to time. He's like, seriously, did you miss the point? I'm like, oh my God, I did. It definitely happens. And he's also, my editor, he's been on the Hill for 15 years, just on the Hill. So he knows everything, he knows everyone. So considering I'm so new to the Hill right now, I've only been working there for about 3 months now, if I don't understand how roll call votes work, or if I don't understand what the procedural stuff on the floor is or whatever, I mean, I have to ask someone for help. And he's definitely a very important resource for me. So having a good relationship with your editor, very important. And also having a good relationship with people on the Hill who are especially related to your beat. So for me, I'm very, like, I try to be as close as possible with the people who work on the Veterans Affairs committees, both on the Senate and the House side, as well as the majority and minority offices, because there are different ones, which took me a minute to realize, actually, when I started there. I started getting along pretty well with the people in the majority offices, and then I was like, wait, where are the Democrats? So kind of realizing that, being in touch with VSOs, being in touch with anyone who's related to my beat is always a very good thing. Half of my days are spent taking people out to coffee.
Yeah, it's just such a people-centric, like, you don't have a story if you're not communicating with someone else.
Exactly, and it's really funny because when I first started on the job, I was just like, why am I spending so much time not doing anything? Like, I'm just talking to people and getting coffee, and this is awesome, but as time goes on and you have those relationships, that definitely helps.
Yeah. And then for Megan, I mean, you're kind of just starting out, you're in the trainee position. Where do you think, like, how do you think you're building those relationships that are so important to your stories?
At this point, it's, making sure that I keep up a relationship with everyone that I talk to for every story. So it's like, it could be just a very quick phone call or a meeting in a hallway or something. But making sure that even when there's not a story, that I'm touching base with them. Because on things like Planned Parenthood, this is something that I randomly got assigned to. It was just look into their funding in July, when things were just starting. And so now, I've talked to tens of people about this, and so touching base with them and saying, any updates on your end, or what have you been researching recently, and that sort of thing. So it's that, making sure that you're not just using someone for one story and then dropping them. It's sort of keeping in touch with them, making sure they know, like, oh, I'm still here, I didn't leave after the summer, and that sort of thing. And within the newsroom too, it's not just your editor, I think it's also the other reporters. And so this might be relatively unique to Reuters, but a lot of people just stay within the company but move from beat to beat. So there's people that aren't on my beats right now that have covered them in the past, and they have the best tips. And even from other news organizations too, anyone I say, if I'm on the Hill, because I'm not there very often, I'll just turn to a reporter next to me and say, wait, who is that congresswoman? What's her name? And people are really willing to help. And so that kind of thing, you're not working by yourself, you're part of a team. So it's important for me to talk to everyone older than me, because everyone is older than me.
Yeah. I know a little bit more, but I feel like you're getting there, definitely. Yeah. So one of the biggest discussions for journalism is how it's gone digital. Not only just like online, but I think Twitter plays a huge role in what you guys do and how people get their news too. Facebook too. But I really think the digital component is just something new. And I would love to kind of learn what your day looks like digitally, how you use social media, or even just publishing your stories to the website. And we can start with you, Megan. What does your day look like on the computer and just dealing with all of the different digital media?
Yeah, I mean, the entire day is on the computer, except for like coffee dates and going from place to place. But Twitter and TweetDeck is a huge thing. Everyone in the newsroom has these Twitter lists up that everyone shares with each other, and some are, of the characters that you need to, everyone in the running for the presidential race and their press people, that sort of thing. But then everyone also has lists of journalists up because they're monitoring other journalists. And with Reuters especially, it's always been a digital company. It's always been a wire service. I guess not always digital, but always been wire. So that was something that I had to learn too, was that, everything is fast. We want to put something up even if we're only publishing a sentence at a time. And so, you're monitoring everything at all times, because we're a pickup service in addition to a news service. And if we, that's something I'm learning, is the standards of, if I see someone tweet something who's just one reporter from a respectable news organization, we might not pick that up immediately, but I'm immediately alerting everyone that I can to say, can we match this? Do we have it on our own? Do we want to pick it up? That sort of thing. So it's trying to be on top of as many things as you can at once. So, you walk by a reporter's computer and they have like 5 TweetDeck lists open at once.
I'm sure like a million tabs open at the same time.
Yeah, of course, like 15. So it's that sort of thing, and it's balancing, there's also, just to balance the old-fashioned part of the newsroom, we have a newspaper table with every front page there too, that we're looking through. So it's just keeping tabs on everything and trying to note, oh, that's something that we can forget about, that's something that I should keep an eye on, and that's something I need to do right now. So you kind of you're marking them that way.
Excellent. And how does your day compare?
It's pretty similar to that. I mean, I think almost every journalist is addicted to Twitter, and especially in a place such as fast-moving as Capitol Hill. Sometimes Twitter is where you have to break news, and it's kind of funny. I don't engage in this, but you see some of our my fellow Capitol Hill colleagues arguing over who broke the news on Twitter. First, it goes that fast. So we use a lot of that. It helps us to promote our stories. It helps us to promote stuff that we may have publishing later tonight. We know what our lawmakers saying, what are their aides saying, what's the message for the day. There's a weird thing recently with House members tweeting from inside their closed door meetings. So sometimes that's how we found out about leadership races, which has been interesting. And it's also Twitter and also to a lesser extent Instagram has been a place where you kind of put little nuggets and details of what you see on Capitol Hill that you wouldn't be able to put into a story, but still are really interesting. A few weeks ago when Jon Stewart was on the Hill lobbying for a 9/11 emergency responders legislation, he walked through kind of the Senate subways where I hang out basically every day, and I was like, ooh, that's Jon Stewart. I interviewed him very briefly, and I also took a picture of him, posted on Instagram, and it got some traction. And also we have whenever senators do something kind of funny in the hallways, that's just kind of like interesting. I know there was a recent moment where Senator Lindsey Graham, who's one of the long shot candidates for president, he kind of went up to the baby daughter of another senator and said, tapped her on the head and said, "I'm sorry about Social Security," which is like a funny little nugget. We're not going to put that in a story. Very Lindsey Graham. He does it on the campaign trail all the time. But it's just funny, so you put that on Twitter and people enjoy it because a lot of people follow us just to kind of get a slice of what Capitol Hill life is about. So that's another way you've been able to that's one of the ways where social media has really helped and enhanced our reporting.
Yeah, I guess I didn't even think about Instagram as a component because I know you guys are very heavy on Twitter, but just getting the picture of the day, that's a great resource. And how about you?
Well, Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter, everything Twitter. I've been trying to expand a little bit, play with Meerkat and Periscope a little bit with the live streaming. What am I thinking of? Snapchat.
Yeah.
Snapchat is a big one. I'm trying to start using that one a little bit more. I'm already Snapchatting my friends when I see people. It's really funny. I saw Elizabeth Warren in the hallway, and I was just like, oh my God, my friends would freak out. So I take a Snapchat, and I'm like, well, while I'm there, why don't I just post it for everyone? So it's definitely been a little bit like, guys, you can just follow me on Snapchat, and maybe you'll get a little bit of what's going on in the Hill. You can post video that way, too. Yeah, I've been trying to experiment a little bit, but I can be kind of a technophobe at times. So I'm like, oh, it's not my first instinct. So it's something I've been working really hard to make more of an instinct. I live tweet everything. I try to live tweet hearings. I live tweet when I'm sitting outside of the leadership meetings or something like that. When people are walking in and out and saying things, I'm like tweeting it. So yeah.
So I think Twitter's the winner then, and TweetDeck too by relationship. So you guys cover a unique area of the news in the sense that you kind of might already have an opinion going in before you're writing. So how do you balance kind of your own political beliefs versus what you're writing about? Because clearly you have to separate the two, but I don't know if you've gotten tips along the way in your career about how to separate the two, or just kind of how do you handle these are the words that I'm writing, but they might not be the words that I believe in or the actions that I believe in. And we can just start with you, Anjali.
Well, I think it's very important to remember that when we're writing stories that are not opinion stories, it's not necessary to inject what we believe in there. And it's a lot more of this is what a person says. Now, for example, Lindsey Graham and the Social Security baby, right? I mean, you can go ahead and stick that in there. And someone else can say, oh, I agree with Lindsey Graham, or someone else could be like, well, I think he's overstating it a little. It is completely up to the reader to say, I agree or disagree. We're not out there saying Lindsey Graham said the right thing or the wrong thing. We're trying to just say what they said and what's happening, and people will come to their own conclusions based on preconceived notions. But also, one of the big things that I realized when I came up to the Hill is that you meet these people and they're people and they all genuinely believe that they're doing the right thing. So the more that I've been up there, the more that I've personally been open to opposition ideas. And it's kind of changed me personally too, to be like, okay, well, that's something I didn't consider before, and maybe it's not ended up in every news article, but it's changed the way that I look at things. But none of that, I try never to let that into what I'm actually writing. Whatever political transformation is going on in my soul, that does not need to make it to the words that I write in a story. Everything that I try to write is, this is what happened, and I'm trying to tell you guys what happened as I saw it, and you guys can really draw your own conclusions.
And Megan, what about you? I mean, Planned Parenthood definitely like that. Everyone has an opinion kind of that way. How have you handled that?
It's been something really interesting, and someone, when I was in school, once said, a professor, I think was quoting someone more important, but was saying that there's no such thing as being unbiased, but you can do your best to be objective. And so with Planned Parenthood, it's an interesting example because we've always included, what each side has said, and that's, Reuters always strives to get that other side, no matter how small it might seem. However many people are saying that or something like that. But with Planned Parenthood, so we're always including the line, Planned Parenthood says it has done nothing wrong. And then after the story was growing and still going, an editor pointed out that, Planned Parenthood has done a lot to say more than just we've done nothing wrong. At this point, they had committed studies to show that the films had been edited, and the other side had said, yes, this photo wasn't actually in the original video and that sort of thing. So then we realized that it was time to expand upon that. And so now instead of just saying they did nothing wrong, they've said, oh, the videos have been discredited and, whatever it is. So it was making sure that not only including the opposition, but including when the opposition changed and was a little bit more beefed up, including that as well. So, I mean, it's something interesting. I've been to hearing after hearing, and being a young woman covering this issue anyway, there's congressmen everywhere shouting their opinions. So it's just been something, to remember. I'm here as a reporter, and I'm here getting very deep into both sides of this issue. So I don't have a dog in this fight.
And what about you?
I think, so I wanted to be a reporter since I was 12 years old, so I always kind of grew up thinking that if someone says something that is an opinion, there's always another side to it. Sometimes they're not 50-50, sometimes one side really is more right than the other, and you can kind of make that conclusion by looking at facts, numbers, and seeing like, okay, who is really kind of on the right side here. But in terms of issues where people do have opposing beliefs and really deeply held beliefs, that's just, you kind of go into it thinking like, all right, well, John Boehner says this, so what would Nancy Pelosi think in response to that? Would they be similar? Would they be would they be on polar opposites? Just kind of going into every issue and thinking, all right, what are what are all the kind of the positions that are being held? And it's also not always just one side against the other. I mean, when I covered immigration, you kind of discovered, people generally thought you were like pro-immigration or anti-immigration, but a lot of the opposition or even the support for it is a lot more nuanced than that. So you could almost divide the feelings on immigration to like 4 different groups or 3 different groups. So in realizing that it's not always just A and B, it's A, B, C, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, E.
All 26
and just,
letters.
Exactly. So just kind of and that's where talking to as many people as possible comes in, because there is always something that you probably are missing, because it's just every issue is very nuanced and complex. So it's just always a matter of talking to as many people as you can about a particular topic.
So I have there's like a weird saying, they say like work is like 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. And I'm kind of wondering, what is the most like inspiring or creative part to your job? I mean, just because at the end of the day, you guys are writers. So I'm just kind of wondering what kind of gets you through the day and what keeps you inspired about your career. And we can start with you, Sungmin, because I feel like you just kind of touched on it. You were saying that you've been wanting to be a reporter for a long time.
I think, well, the one inspiring part about just being a Capitol Hill reporter is that you get a front row to history, like almost quite literally so often. And sometimes we all can get jaded in our jobs. I'm just like, I have to cover another stakeout with Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell. They're not going to say anything new, or we're going to another budget crisis. But you kind of take a step back and think, this is a historical institution where news happens almost every day. It's a point of view that, most journalists will never have a chance to see. So we have a very unique privilege in that, whenever I remember, when the Pope was here, that was obviously pure history a few weeks ago. I remember when the Senate immigration bill passed, and I was sitting in the front row of the press gallery while all the senators were voting one by one, I remember thinking, if this gets signed into law, and I was very skeptical that it would, but if it did, I mean, this could be like the Civil Rights Act of 64 and 65, like it could be, and I was there to witness it. So it's kind of, so whenever that kind of comes into mind, then you think like, wow, this is a really unique, privilege that we all have. Yeah.
Excellent. Anjali, what about you? What kind of gets you through the day, inspires you for your career?
I would have to say a lot of it. She talked about. No, seriously.
Yeah.
History, that was a great, the history part.
The
I
front
just
row
didn't
to
think
history,
about-
that was
yeah,
great.
That's
But that.
Twitter bio.
Yeah. Make a giant poster, stick it up in the gallery. No, definitely. I mean, it's the fact that I've really have been a politics junkie for a very long time, and I used to work at the Annapolis State House, so that was on a smaller level or something, and now I'm at the national legislature, getting to be there every day and stuff. So, I mean, honestly, for me, the excitement of walking to the Capitol as my place of work has not really worn off yet. And I walk through the halls, and as I go up, I see like the Foreign Relations Committee room, and I just kind of like, I get pretty excited as I walk through it. So that hasn't really worn off on me yet. But just meeting all of the big names too, it's easy to get starstruck, but it's also easy to step back and be like, okay, well, you guys can get voted out at any time. So.
Very true.
Yeah. I'm half joking. No, but I mean, it's very cool because I've gotten to meet, like Ted Cruz, Elizabeth Warren, Paul Ryan, John Boehner, meet these guys, but also ask them to say, right, and the media is a very interesting spot where we're like in between the people who vote and the people who were voted, right? They have to speak to their electorate, and a lot of the times they do it through us. So it's kind of cool to stand there and be like, well, why'd you vote like that? Why did you do that? What is your justification for this? And not in an angry way, in a way of saying, well, you were voted in, and now you do have to explain your actions to the people who voted you in. And some of those people read our publications. So it's very cool that way.
Now, Megan, are you along the same lines, or do you have anything to kind of add to the history-making bit?
Two things, and it's like the big and the small. So one is at the end of my internship before the traineeship started, I actually went to England, where Reuters is headquartered, and talking to people there, realizing that being from Washington, eyes throughout the entire world are on Washington. So that's one of the things, is that's like the really big picture. But then the flip side of that is talking to people, and I've been working on a longer term story for a while, and every time I bring it up to a new person, when they say, thank you so much for writing this, like this is something that's, needed to be covered for a long time. And so that's the kind of thing that makes me think, what other stories are out there that I could talk to, 100 other people that say, thank you for covering this, this is what we need. And being, connecting that with being at a really big name organization, where I talk to reporters in the newsroom all the time who they wrote this story that changed this legislation, or they wrote this story that then led to, President Obama calling them and having a conversation. And so it's just realizing that, you are the liaison between these really powerful people and just very everyday people.
Well, I think that's the perfect note to end on. I appreciate this conversation, just because I want to give women the chance to kind of learn what it is that you guys really do, and just kind of what inspires you, just so we can inspire other ladies to do what you do, because there's not enough women doing it. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I'm going to close out here, but thank you. All right, I want to thank Sungmin, Anjali, and Megan for joining me today. Before you go, I do want to leave you all with a book recommendation. So we're going to put this up here. On March 16th, 1970, 46 women at Newsweek filed a class action lawsuit against the magazine, accusing them of gender discrimination in their hiring and promotion practices. The Good Girls Revolt, written by Lynn Povich, follows the story of these women and their landmark case. It was a thrilling read, and I cannot recommend it enough for those interested in the field of journalism. I hope you all enjoyed our discussion today, learning a little bit more about what it means to work in political journalism. Until our next episode, stay ambitious. Yay!